Hello everyone, my name is Alilia and this is Amina. And today in Generation Next we have a very special guest, the Vice Minister of Ecology, Geology and Natural Resources, Zulfia Sулейменова. Good evening, Zulfia. Thank you so much for your time and it's very nice meeting you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
For the first question, we would really like to know what your path was towards this important role of becoming the Vice Minister of Ecology.
I think first of all, I would like to really share how I really came to being excited about environment. I never thought that my path will bring me to Ministry of Ecology. I was actually passionate about international relations, so I decided that after graduating school, I want to study international relations, and that's what I actually did. But while I was studying, I thought that there should be something that is very important, something that can bring something good, some benefits to people, to public, to environment. And this is where I started being interested in sustainable development. Sustainable development is something that balances the economy, environment, and society. It is, in a way, balanced life. So it became very much interested in it, especially with the environmental component. And then I decided to pursue my career path in this specific direction. And although I was studying international relations, still my research interest was environmental security and environmental issues. And then I was working in United Nations with Environment and Development Division. And then after I had quite a bit of a journey. And then I ended up in Ministry of Environment, which I'm very much excited about.
Thank you. So recently, we know that you have attended the Human Environment Conference in Stockholm. And I would like to ask you what problems were raised and what solutions have been raised as well during that conference.
Yes, it was actually a great, privilege to me being part of that specific conference, because it was in 1972. It was exactly 50 years ago in Stockholm for the first time in human history when the environmental issues were raised for the first time. So this is where people started saying that, well, the environment actually impacts human well-being. We really have to think about environment. We really have to think about planet. And 50 years after catching up and being part of this big event was a really big privilege, and representing Kazakhstan was also really great. What kind of issues are we raising? Of course, the first thing is climate change. We're already observing how the climate is changing, and that is having devastating impacts and effects on pretty much everything in our life, starting from human health, human well-being, and ending with some economic growth and development. Secondly, of course, I was quite interested to hear that people are talking about plastic pollution, especially in oceans. And I think that is something that is also very much, topical for Kazakhstan as well. The third thing being circular economy. I think when we talk about circular economy, most of the time we tend to really limit ourselves with waste only and waste recycling. However, circular economy is something much broader. It is something that can create economic activity. It can create jobs. It is a whole new system. It's basically an industry when you're creating this closed loop industrial activity. And that is really exciting. And I think it has a really great potential. And we in Kazakhstan, I think we also have to really explore these things. So I think pretty much around these topics we were discussing, but it was really great to also catch up with other countries and really hear what they are doing in environmental field, to really learn their experience and bring something back with us.
So overall, for Kazakhstan, what would you say is a major environmental problem, like the leading one?
Well, I think there are several environmental issues. I think first being waste, of course. I mean, we see it everywhere. It's very difficult not to notice waste. And I think the first thing is using single-use stuff is very convenient. However, it's not always environmentally friendly. I think the first thing we should be really thinking about how to reduce our the consumption levels and how to reduce the waste that is being generated. Of course, sometimes it's very difficult to completely avoid it, and there is nothing wrong with it. But I think we really have to move in the direction of reducing it. Second one is air quality. That is also very topical, and moreover, I should say that according to latest research, the air quality issue in Kazakhstan results in approximately 15,000 premature deaths per year, which is a lot. That's a big economic externality, which we really have to think about how we should be internalizing. So there are big issues with air quality, and of course, we as Ministry of Ecology, we are. I hope in the nearest time we will come with some interesting solutions, and that is something that we really have to a bit galvanize our actions. And third being, I think, climate change, definitely. We are a landlocked country and we are experiencing the increase in temperature much faster than comparing to the world average, which is quite devastating. Last year's droughts are the result of climate change. Maybe climate change was not the sole factor. However, it was the threat multiplier in a way. And of course, that was really devastating for many people. It was devastating for economy. And when we're talking about climate change, we're also talking about the prospects of economic development. And we really have to think how we should be addressing climate change effectively. I think I should say probably these three are the biggest ones. And of course, there are many more which are bit smaller or can be grouped in a bigger categories, but these three I would single out. But of course, for example, if you take, for example, what resource issues that might be linked with climate change as well. So it's kind of this broad big issues I should single out.
Okay, so could you tell us about any improvements made so far in Kazakhstan's ecology and sustainability, and how's our overall awareness on these matters?
I would say that it's really exciting because people are much more aware and there is much more demand and interest for environmental agenda, which I feel very humbled as Vice Minister who is working on environmental issues, because that means that I can really work with public, and people and civil society are my best partners, right, in addressing the issues. Of course, many things are being done and many things have been done, but unfortunately, we're seeing that there are still many things that should be done. As I said, if we go back to waste issues, of course, the waste issue which we used to have 10 years ago is uncomparable to what we have today, because of the economic development, because of the level of consumerism and so on. So we're used to, have this very fast fashion. We like eating more meat. We like having single use, some plastic bags, something else, packaging, and that everything they do result in environmental issues. So of course it's a little bit difficult to compare, but there are many things that we should be doing, and I think one of the biggest I think achievements in Kazakhstan, probably that is something natural and organic in a way, that we have our younger generation who are much more interested in environmental issues. And I think we should be really working more actively with this generation to really think a bit more out of the box in terms of the solutions for environmental issues.
As you may know, Germany is considered a leader in recycling, and they have recycling bins for many categories of trash, such as plastic, rubber, glass. I wanted to ask if Kazakhstan has something similar, and where Kazakhstan's waste usually goes to.
Thank you. That's a good question. We do have recycling. We do have companies, small and medium enterprises who are, let's say, in a recycling business, waste business, or should I say. In different parts of Kazakhstan, the levels are very different. And with new environmental code, which was adopted just last year, it's been only 1 year since we had new environmental legislation. Of course, we did introduce more regulations for recycling, for sorting waste, because to recycle, you need to sort the waste. We do have very different level of uptake in these policies, but I think that we really need to galvanize actions and become more active. We have local authorities who should be really leaders in promoting the sorting of the waste and and further creation of the infrastructure for the waste recycling. This is a little bit, I think we need to really catch up on that, and I think we have lots of work to do in this direction. Most of the time we focus on recycling, but we also have to focus on reducing. And that's a big part. If we don't reduce, then recycling might be not enough. There are many countries who have an amazing and the most sophisticated systems in waste recycling, yet they are world's leaders in exporting their waste to other countries, because the amount of waste that is being generated is so enormous and so big that it is impossible to recycle in one country. So waste is a bit a complex topic. So I think the first thing is, and according to our legislation as well, the first thing that we should be doing, we should be reducing the waste and then recycling.
How important do you think is awareness for the citizens of Kazakhstan on reducing their waste and mindfully discarding it?
I think the awareness of the population is increasing. I personally, when I go back to my hometown, my hometown is quite an industrial city. And growing up, I don't remember us talking or discussing waste recycling or environmental issues that much. But in the last couple of years, every time when I go back and every time when I meet very different groups of people, they always talk about environmental issues, about climate change. They talk about waste sorting, waste recycling, waste collection. They say we want to have a better infrastructure for waste management system and so on. So it's really exciting to hear that the people are becoming much more engaged in environmental issues. And this is where I think this is one of the biggest progresses that we have made. I think we have to be really building on from that.
So, like you noted, climate change is a very important issue, and it is one of the world's leading environmental problems. So, what and how much evidence has there been of climate change in Kazakhstan?
We do observe climate change. We have Kaz Hydromet system service, and they do create the climate models, and we have been observing for the last so many years. So according to our observations, in the last 100 years, the temperature has increased by 0.32 degrees. It was increasing by every 10 years, 0.32 degrees. Whereas the world average was 0.18. So that is almost 2 times less than comparing to Kazakhstan. So we have been observing that, and we are continuing doing this observations. At the same time, we do also build other models, and we try to really think about what are the economic impacts, where we see other issues. For example, we normally prepare big reports, and we share that with different government agencies. For example, we have been observing that the summer wheat, that the yields of the summer wheat are going to drop if the climate continues changing. So by 2040, it might be from 15% to almost 50% decrease in the yields, which is going to be huge. Huge impact on food security, huge impact on economy, huge impact on farmers' well-being, and so on. So it really depends on which scenario we are taking. So we have been really observing in different sectors. When we were writing our new environmental legislation, we were actually thinking about how can we reduce the impact of climate change onto our economy and onto our population and people. And we realized that we really have to mainstream climate change adaptation. So that being said, in environmental code, we have a separate chapter which is basically about climate change and mainstreaming climate change adaptation into policy planning. So we have identified 4 key areas which are the most vulnerable to climate change. That is water resources, forestry, agriculture, and disaster risk reduction. So every year we also, for the disasters, every spring, I think, we see so many floods. We see in winter so many blizzards and other things like some extreme weather events. And we have been observing that the number of these extreme weather events, they have been increasing, which is also not very good for economy. So we have identified these 4 sectors, and we are working with these government agencies on doing basically the vulnerability assessment and really developing the plans and the action plans to reduce those vulnerabilities, so that the damage and the loss from climate change in these sectors are at minimum.
So during the UN Climate Summit in December 2020, Tokayev pledged that Kazakhstan will reach carbon neutrality by 2060. Could you please tell us more about our strategy to achieve this, and how well are we working towards this goal?
Yes, indeed. When President Tokayev has pledged, he stated that we are pledging to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. Of course, there was a plan behind. We are currently developing a strategy on carbon neutrality that is going to be our long-term strategy, that will really identify different sectors in which we really have to do different adjustments and different policies to reduce carbon emissions. But that being said, of course, there is lots of things need to be done in terms of energy efficiency. Lots of things need to be done in terms of energy transition from coal-fired power plants to something more green. We have an emissions trading system in Kazakhstan, which is one of the mechanisms to incentivize the companies to reduce their carbon emissions. We are working on it. We have been developing it since 2013, and we are planning to align it with the European emissions trading system. So basically, gradually, we're working on that and really creating different incentives, policies, regulations, but also incentives for the companies and for the businesses to really think in a more green manner.
Thank you. Regarding the air quality in Kazakhstan, as you said before, it affects many people in Kazakhstan. I would like to know, if you do know, which city in Kazakhstan is mostly affected by air pollution and what causes it.
We have 16 cities which we identify as the most polluted, which is the capital of Kazakhstan, Nur-Sultan, Almaty, Temirtau, Atyrau, Aktobe, and so on, about 16 cities in total. If you take different cities, the air pollution is caused by different things. For example, in Nur-Sultan, we have been observing, and we see that it is mainly from heating in wintertime. We actually see, we were building the model, and we see that it just hits, it just picks the air pollution. And then in summertime, it's minimum, and then in wintertime, it goes up again. In Almaty, for example, it's coal-fired power plants, but also the heating system, mainly not from the central heating, but the household heating system. The same is in capital household heating system. So in different cities, we have different air pollution problems and different sources. And of course, to work on that, we have a special roadmaps on improving the environmental situation in those cities. And we also are working with the biggest polluters in those cities to make sure that they reduce their pollution, their pollutants. But at the same time, we also understand that we really need to think a bit differently and out of the box. So it is impossible to reduce emissions or pollution if we do not modernize, for example. So there are certain regulations in environmental code which says that these big plants and big polluters, they really have to introduce best available techniques, so that they have to modernize and really reduce their anthropogenic impact on and pressure on environment. But at the same time, we as Ministry of Ecology, we're also thinking how we can improve the regulation of this specific field? How can we improve the monitoring? So we are now doing some research, and hopefully that will result and eventuate in some regulations in terms of we have certain standards for air quality which we use, and then we are thinking that we need to move towards a bit different, a bit stricter standards to actually make sure that the air quality actually responds to the best interest of human health.
Thank you. According to the UNDP, Kazakhstan's biodiversity is known to be under threat from unsustainable agricultural practices. Could you please tell us our plans on preserving this biodiversity?
Thank you. Biodiversity is something that my colleague is doing, but still I would like to note a few things. When we're talking about environmental degradation, about climate change and other things, we really have to bear in mind the fact that everything in environment, in nature, they are interconnected. If you do break the balance between these different elements, then the balance in the entire system is going to be broken. So when we're talking about biodiversity loss, why is it happening? It might be because for example, the pasture lands are degrading, because they are losing the areas where they can feed themselves, because they are losing the habitat, the natural habitat, because of the climate change or because of the human activity and so on. So when we are talking about anything or biodiversity or anything related to environment, we really have to think in systems and really have this bigger picture view. So for us, for example, we do see, I think one of the biggest and overarching topics for us in this respect would be climate change, because climate change, it really results in degradation of natural habitats for so many different species. So we really have to think, and of course there is also this anthropogenic impact caused, for example, from spills, oil spills, for example, in Caspian Sea, or pollution. In this respect, of course, what we really want to do is we want companies to be more responsible. So when we work with the companies, with the polluters, we always say that you really have to be more responsible. There is social and there is environmental responsibility of each of the company. At the same time, in new environmental code, we also introduced that the polluter has to pay if the polluter, for example, destroyed something or polluted something. Then they have to pay, but they also have to restore. They have to bring this environment back to what it used to be before they have intervened. So this is one of the overarching principles in our environmental legislation. And of course, we really have to yet fully operationalize it, because it entered into force just 1 year ago. So there's still many things that we need to do, and hopefully with these principles ingrained in our actions, I think we would be able to improve the environmental situation in general.
So finally, we would like to ask, what message or advice would you give to the forthcoming generation?
I will tell to the next generation to be just you, to do whatever you like, to be passionate about what you're doing, and to be, I think, engaged in what you're doing. I mean, not being, there are sometimes that people do some things because they have to do those things, right? But what I really want to do is I want to see people being passionate about what they're doing, because if you're passionate, then you can really make change. And for example, especially when we're talking about environment and ecology, we need people who are passionate about what they're doing, who are passionate about the environment, who really want to save I don't know, the Caspian seals, who want to save the forests, who want to save the seas. And that might be sometimes difficult. And the journeys might be sometimes difficult and disappointing. However, if you have this big idea and if you have this big goal, then I think it will be something that will be always pushing you towards that big goal. So I really want a young generation to be passionate, to be just themselves, to try everything, to see the world, to really just really enjoy, because sometimes we're just really being put in some boxes, in some boundaries, and told to be something. However, life is very short, life is exciting, and I really want young generation to see everything for themselves, only good things, not the bad things, to really see the life and the world for themselves, and really decide what they are most passionate about. And this is something that I wish to them. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So on this great note, our interview is coming to an end. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.